When one thinks of Lionel trains, this comes to mind. O-scale models that were more toy-like than anything else, although admittedly did attract quite a few adults back in the day. Time hurries on and things change as always, and even by this early point in the mid-50s, we're beginning to look a bit dated and out of place against the HO scale trains, which in addition to being much higher detailed, were also much more appropriate for a new era of smaller homes, even smaller than before, to accommodate the baby boom and the move into the metropolitan areas. And now we've come to a point in time where model trains themselves are now the territory of adults, starting from ages 14 and up. This will probably come as a complete surprise to some of my viewers, but Lionel was already in HO scale starting in the mid-50s. They had seen the need for more compact and realistic trains and the popularity of HO scale and decided to jump on board. And they didn't do this from original thinking in this case, they simply subcontracted with companies such as Rivarossi, Atheron, and Kadar, the owners of Bachmann, and to paraphrase a certain automotive journalist, crossed their names out and wrote in Lionel in crayon. Be forgiven for saying you've never heard of Lionel HO scale, as the company really couldn't make up its mind as to whether it wanted to stick with the products or not. These product introductions were sporadic and unstable, going in and out of stock many years apart, the last time being sometime in the mid-2000s. Then in 2016, Lionel announced it was getting back into HO scale with the release of a few new train sets, and the subject of today's review is one of them. The New York Central Water Level Limited set is a new train set from Lionel in HO scale. It can be controlled via DC, DCC, or through the Lion Chief included controller, or via Bluetooth, or via an app via Bluetooth available on the Android and iOS store. Please note the disclaimer noted in the corner of the box as to the age of operations being 14 years or older. Well, that's just about enough background on that for now. Let's open her up and see what we got. Inside we have the Lionel Chief Controller and 3 coaches all lit with capacitors to help eliminate any flickering over bad or dirty sections of track. As we see, the packaging is well done with plastic and cellophane. Moving on to the locomotive, it's an 8-wheeler Berkshire type locomotive, which has of course again Bluetooth, DCC and sound, as well as DCC. The locomotive itself is not what I call a super detailed model, I'll get into that later. Most of the details are simply molded on. Background, let's get this whole package open and take a good look at what we have. Let's take a good look at the Berkshire locomotive. Now this particular engine is an interesting choice for a beginner train set as it has many wheels, making it hard to get on the track. As I mentioned before, most of the details are simply molded right into the plastic mold itself. There's nothing separately applied. It's pretty well detailed, but I wouldn't call it a hardcore model. Then again, we have to remember the price this train set sells at is much lower than what Lionel would normally charge for a single locomotive, let alone a set. One could be forgiven if they thought they've seen these coaches before, as they are essentially reskins of the Polar Express coaches, in the New York Central Herald in this case, and done very well, I must say. One minor nitpick I have is that the observation car's rear light is actually white, not red, as it should be. It's not clear how this minor omission got through, as the coaches these are based upon have red lights in their rear observation cars. I would also like to point out that while the power is capacitor buffered to avoid flickering over bad sections of track, it still comes through the old school wheel wipers. As we take a look at this coach, right, the middle coach here underneath on its detailing, we see that the wheel wipers are in fact in contact with the axles. Overall, these are very nice coaches. They feel well weighted and well put together, and they have nice lighting. While they may not be the highest of high detail, they certainly get the job done. And I have to admit, one of the main reasons why I bought this set is to get a set of these passenger coaches to run on my layout, as I have several New York Central locomotives with passenger equipment that these would match up very well with. One final note, while the locomotive does have DCC as well as sound as well as Bluetooth, the coaches do not and are simply on at all times. Here's a good shot of the Lionel Chief remote controller, essentially a basic Bluetooth controller with easy to understand operations. I'll show that to you in a little bit more detail. It does require 4 AAA batteries to operate. And here's a close-up of the information panel located on the bottom of the box. I should note that the DCC conversion they're talking about is a simple switch underneath the tender that turns this from DC to DCC or remote. Please note the description also mentions the Magnalock Power Track system, which I will be going into detail on as I want to give the full experience as to what it's like to actually own this particular set. And without further ado, let's get this set up so we can really take a good look at it. First Interestingly enough, the tracks don't just feature magnets to hold them together when they're set up on a layout, but also to hold them together when you put them into storage. They're stored in groups of two. And over here we have the power pack / water wall transformer that actually powers the tracks. I should take this time to note that these tracks are not powered in a conventional manner. I'll get more into that as we go into how to set them up. And here we see what I was talking about. The tracks are literally joined on top of each other to prevent them from being damaged during shipment, and will literally pull themselves back together again if close enough. And without further ado, let's get the rest of these tracks out and get this show on the carpet, I guess. Again, I should point out that this track is apparently designed to be on the carpet, although we'll find that there are some complications with using it with a surface that it's not tied down to. Another interesting decision by Lionel is to include this 20-inch radius track, not 22 like you would see in some of the higher-end sets or 18 on the lower-end sets, but 20-inch radius. Interesting choice which will make more sense as we go along. Remember what I said about this track being unconventionally powered? Well, as it turns out, the DC power pack literally plugs directly up to the track itself. A consequence of this is that the track would not work directly, at least out of the box, with a DCC system. One would have to find a compatible plug, and then connect the wires accordingly to make an adapter, not something I would necessarily recommend. Now it's time to get the locomotive connected to the tender. This is critical and required as the tender contains all the electronics including the DCC as well as the Bluetooth chips. This would prove to be a bit of a challenge, and what turned out to be an even bigger challenge, getting the locomotive onto the track itself. I'm still not sure why Lionel thought it was a good idea to include an 8-wheeler engine in a beginner's set like this. I've been in the hobby myself for more than 30 years, and I found it very tedious to get it on the tracks. I have to wonder what a person with no experience think of trying to handle this behemoth. With the locomotive on the tracks, it's now time to rail the coaches and get them set up to run. Again, the coaches come right on as soon as you place them on the track, as again there is no DCC or Bluetooth control in the coaches. Finally, after a lot of extended messing around, I'm ready to fire the unit up. I'll be using the Lionel Chief Controller to operate the unit. We simply turn the power on, and that annoying chirping, whistling sound stops. We are then greeted with the chuffing sound of the locomotive at idle at a station. Listen to some radio transmissions.
Set up right. Your train will be ready.
As you can see, there are just a few buttons on the remote to control everything. The top round switch, of course, is the throttle, and the bell and the horn are on opposite sides of the controller, with the radio button located between the two of them.
Are we clear to pull? Over. You're clear to proceed east. Out.
And away she goes. I must say that the controller itself actually feels pretty good in the hand. It looks cheap at first, but I find the throttle is very easy to understand and operate, and the locomotive itself is very responsive to slow running. Unfortunately, this track is not perfect, as we will quickly see. Now she does in reverse. Ooh, that's not good. Remember what I said about the track not being perfect? By simply reversing the locomotive, I actually separated one of the rails. It also derailed one of the coaches because of the sudden jerk. Again, right there. Also had some strange couple head issues as we're seeing right here with the two coaches. This was interesting as I found in my previous experiences with similar coaches built by Lionel is that they always held well. I must say the chuffing effect kind of sounds more like a fire engine, especially at high speeds, than it does a train. Not really all that inspired. There we go with the track issues again. The problem is with this track is that while it is held in quite securely with the magnets, they don't hold it in very firmly. So any kind of unstable shift caused by even the locomotive coming to a sudden stop can cause the tracks to be shifted out of alignment and thus causing the derailments you're witnessing here. And here is what was causing all of my issues. As you can see, the track shifted just enough to give a gap between the two sections where the rails join, causing the train to derail every time it hit it. While this is easy to correct, it's annoying as it happens quite frequently, and then when you correct one track, much like old school HO scale track, it tends to happen on every other section. I was going to do a detailed video on how the engine ran on my layout. Unfortunately, this locomotive will not play ball with my number 4 type switches on it. Bottom line for this set, this is a great set to get started with. Just be very wary with the tracks themselves, and also be wary if you're buying this set and you just plan to use the parts for different things. The tracks will not be easily adaptable to DCC, and while they are easy to put together initially, they can come apart very easily. Also note that while this is a nice quality set, it is not fully detailed and should not be considered a connoisseur's item, although yet again, it is not designed for children. And before I close, I'd like to give a shout out as well as some credit to OchoSeeker.net. Again, a great site if you're into collecting trains in general. Without their wealth of knowledge, I would not have been able to complete this video. That'll do it for this review, folks. If you liked it, go ahead and subscribe. Drive thumbs up. If you don't like it, thumbs down. Thank you for watching, and as always, keep the metal side, that is the wheels, down.